My name is Natalie, and I'm 28 years old. When I was 8, my dad stopped cooking meals. The refrigerator stayed empty while he spent evenings with a bottle instead of caring for his only daughter. I taught myself to cook watching YouTube videos, stretching my allowance at the corner store just to eat. 15 years later, I run my own catering business. Last month, my dad's new wife Vanessa showed up at my door with empty containers, expecting me to fill them with a week's worth of meals for her 3 kids. The audacity of expecting the once starving child to now feed the family that never fed her. While I share how I went from a neglected child to being expected to serve my stepmother's kids, let me know where you're watching from and hit subscribe if you've ever had to stand up to unreasonable family demands. The divorce happened when I was 7. I remember standing in our driveway watching my mother's packed car disappear around the corner, not understanding that her occasional phone calls would be the extent of our relationship for years to come. My father and I were left alone in a house that seemed to grow quieter and emptier by the day. At first, Dad tried. He would make simple meals like spaghetti with jar sauce or frozen pizza. He would remember to sign my school permission slips most of the time. But as weeks turned to months, his initial effort gave way to a deepening depression that swallowed not just his happiness, but his basic parental responsibilities. By the time I turned 8, the refrigerator often contained nothing but condiments and beer. Dinner time would come and go without any acknowledgement. When I would ask, "What's for dinner, Dad?" his responses varied from a confused, "Oh, is it that time already?" to an irritated, "Just find something," or sometimes no response at all as he stared at the television, another beer in hand. The first time I truly felt hunger pangs, I searched every cabinet and found only stale crackers and peanut butter. I made myself a sad little meal and promised myself it wouldn't happen again. The next day, I took my allowance money that I'd been saving for a new book and walked 3 blocks to the corner store. I bought bread, cheese slices, apples, and a box of granola bars, carefully calculating the total on a small notepad as I selected each item. "Cooking for your family, sweetie?" the cashier asked as she rang up my purchases. "Yes, ma'am," I replied, not knowing how else to explain why a 3rd grader was grocery shopping alone. Back at home, I created a system. I kept non-perishable food items hidden in my bedroom closet, tucked inside an old backpack. I learned which foods lasted longest and which gave me the most energy for school. I discovered that a spoonful of peanut butter before bed would keep my stomach from growling through the night. YouTube became my cooking instructor. I started with videos titled "Easy Meals for Kids" and progressed to more complex recipes as my skills improved. Our kitchen had basic supplies that my mother had left behind, and I taught myself to use them safely. My first attempt at scrambled eggs left a mess, but by the 10th try, I could make them fluffy and perfect. My father's neglect extended beyond meals. Clean laundry became my responsibility after wearing the same clothes to school enough times that my teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, gently asked if everything was okay at home. "My dad's just been really busy with work," I lied, protecting the father who wasn't protecting me. Mrs. Rodriguez became my silent ally, occasionally forgetting her lunch and sharing her extra sandwich with me, or sending me home with leftover cookies from class events. She never pushed too hard with questions, perhaps sensing my fierce pride and reluctance to admit the truth. But her kindness was a lifeline. By age 10, I was handling most household responsibilities. I learnt to use the washing machine by reading the instructions taped to the inside lid. I figured out which cleaning products worked on which surfaces through trial and error. I set alarms to remind myself about homework bedtime and when to leave for school. The neighbours must have noticed something wasn't right. Mrs. Patel from next door would occasionally bring over extra dinner she had made, claiming she always cooked too much for just her and her husband. Mr. Wilson across the street would mow our lawn, sometimes saying he was already out with the mower anyway. That's awesome. These small kindnesses never addressed the core problem, but created tiny islands of normalcy in my unusual childhood. My father would occasionally emerge from his fog with grand promises. "This weekend we'll go shopping and stock up on all your favourite foods," he'd say, with temporary enthusiasm that rarely materialised into action. Or he'd bring home takeout and watch me eat with a satisfaction that suggested he believed this occasional effort balanced out the daily neglect. By 12, I could prepare complete meals using whatever ingredients I managed to buy, with my allowance supplemented by small jobs like collecting neighbours' mail when they were away. I became an expert at stretching a few dollars into multiple meals. Rice became a staple I could transform with different seasonings and whatever protein was on sale. Eggs became a versatile source of nutrition. A single chicken could become 3 different meals with careful planning. There were dangerous moments in my self-taught culinary education. I still have a small scar on my wrist from my first attempt to drain boiling pasta. I once set off the smoke alarm trying to make toast in a pan when our toaster broke. But necessity pushed me forward, and each mistake became a lesson I couldn't afford not to learn. The hardest part wasn't the cooking itself, but the emotional weight of being forgotten. Some evenings, I would place a plate of food in front of my father, and he would eat without comment or acknowledgement, as if meals appeared by magic rather than through his daughter's efforts. Other times, he would compliment my cooking, while intoxicated, only to have no memory of it the next day. Pride became my companion. When I mastered a new recipe or technique, there was no one to celebrate with me, so I learned to congratulate myself. I kept a small notebook where I recorded my culinary successes, complete with adjustments to make dishes better next time. This journal became evidence that despite being forgotten, I was still worthy of remembering. By 13, I had developed cooking skills beyond many adults I knew. Out of necessity, I could plan meals, shop efficiently, and create nourishing food from limited ingredients. What began as survival had transformed into a genuine skill and eventually a passion that would shape my future in ways I couldn't yet imagine. But in those quiet moments after I'd washed the dishes I'd used to cook for myself, put away the leftovers I'd carefully planned for tomorrow's lunch, and wiped down the counters my father never noticed, I would sometimes allow myself to feel the sadness of being the child who had to parent herself. When I turned 13, I started babysitting for families in our neighborhood. Beyond the much-needed income, these jobs provided glimpses into normal family life that both comforted and pained me. I watched parents leave detailed notes about their children's routines, prepare snacks in advance, and return home eager to hear about their kids' evenings. The contrast with my own home life was stark. The babysitting money allowed me to buy better groceries and occasionally cover utility bills when my father forgot to pay them. I became adept at forging his signature on checks to keep our electricity and water running. By 14, I was managing our household budget better than many adults, tracking expenses in a worn composition book and prioritizing necessities over wants with the wisdom of someone much older. My cooking skills continued to develop, partly from necessity, and partly because creating food had become my creative outlet, my way of caring for myself when no one else would. I became known among my babysitting clients for the healthy snacks I prepared for their children. One mother jokingly offered to hire me as her family's personal chef after tasting the banana bread I'd made while watching her kids. School remained my sanctuary, a place where I could temporarily set aside adult responsibilities and just be a teenager. I maintained good grades despite my home situation, knowing education was my ticket to a different future. Teachers occasionally commented on my unusual maturity, unaware of its origins in necessity rather than natural temperament. At 16, I got a part-time job at Daisy's Diner, a local restaurant known for its home-style cooking. The owner, Sophia, recognized my unusual cooking skills during my interview when I helped fix an oversalted soup without being asked. She took me under her wing, transforming my self-taught techniques into professional skills. "Where did you learn to cook like this?" she asked one day after watching me expertly rescue a hollandaise sauce that had started to separate. "YouTube and hunger are great teachers," I replied with a small smile, sharing a rare glimpse of my reality. Sophia's expression softened with understanding, and from that day forward, she became more than a boss. She showed me techniques that elevated my cooking from good to exceptional, explained the science behind cooking processes, and introduced me to flavors and ingredients I'd never encountered in my limited shopping expeditions. My father rarely asked about my job or my increasingly refined cooking skills. On the rare occasions when I cooked something special at home, he would eat without comment. Yet I discovered he sometimes bragged about my culinary abilities to neighbors, or his occasional girlfriends taking credit for nurturing my talent. My daughter gets her cooking skills from my side of the family. I overheard him telling a date he'd brought home one evening. I always encouraged her in the kitchen. The gap between his perception and reality was so vast, it would have been laughable if it weren't so painful. In his mind, perhaps he had been a supportive father. In reality, I had raised myself while he existed alongside me, more roommate than parent. During my junior year of high school, I began researching culinary schools in secret. Sophia helped me understand the application process and wrote a glowing recommendation letter, highlighting my exceptional talent and unparalleled work ethic. With her guidance, I applied for every scholarship available, knowing my father couldn't or wouldn't contribute to my education. The day my acceptance letter arrived from the Culinary Institute with a substantial scholarship offer was one of the happiest of my life. I showed my father the letter over dinner, a meal I had cooked as I did every night. Cooking school, he said, barely glancing at the letter. Isn't that expensive? You can already cook fine. I got a scholarship, I explained. It covers most of the tuition. He shrugged and returned to his food. Well, I guess that's good then. No congratulations, no pride, just acceptance that I would continue to handle my life as I always had without his input or support. I moved out the week after graduation, packing my carefully curated collection of second-hand cookbooks, my notebook of recipes, and the few kitchen tools I had saved up to buy over the years. My father helped carry boxes to my used car, purchased with savings from 2 years of working at the diner, but there was no emotional farewell. Call if you need anything, so he said as I prepared to drive away. I nodded, knowing I wouldn't call and knowing he didn't expect me to. We had established a relationship based on not needing each other, and we both understood the script too well to change it now. As I drove toward my new life, I felt a complex mixture of excitement for my future and grief for the childhood I never had. The rearview mirror showed my father standing in the driveway, already turning back toward the house, before I had even pulled away a final image that perfectly encapsulated our relationship. Culinary school was everything I had dreamed of, and more. For the first time, I was surrounded by people who spoke my language of flavors, techniques, and passion for food. My classmates came from various backgrounds, some from restaurant families, others career changers, a few former home cooks, but none had learned to cook quite the way I had. My practical experience gave me an edge in many classes. While other students struggled with basic knife skills or time management in the kitchen, these were second nature to me after years of necessity. However, I had gaps in my knowledge too. I had never worked with expensive ingredients like saffron or truffle oil. The first time I tasted real vanilla bean instead of the imitation extract I could afford from the corner store, I nearly cried at the complexity of flavor. Contact with my father dwindled to occasional text messages and brief phone calls on holidays. Our conversations followed a predictable pattern. He would ask if school was going okay. I would provide minimal information, and the call would end without either of us revealing anything meaningful about our lives. During my second year, I secured an internship at Bellflower, a restaurant known for its innovative approach to traditional pastry. The head pastry chef, Marcus, recognized something in me that I hadn't fully acknowledged myself. Not just skill born of necessity, but genuine creativity and intuition with flavors. You have a gift for knowing what belongs together, he told me after I had suggested adding cardamom to a traditional apple tart. That's something that can't be taught. Atais. Under Marcus's mentorship, I discovered my specialty in the culinary world, pastry and baking. The precision required satisfied the part of me that had learned to measure and portion food carefully to make it last. The transformation of simple ingredients into something beautiful spoke to my need to create order and nurture through food. By graduation, I had job offers from 3 prestigious restaurants, including Bellflower. I surprised myself by declining them all. Instead, I decided to return to my hometown and start my own small catering business, specializing in custom desserts and pastries. The decision wasn't about reconciliation with my father, but about reclaiming the place where I had learned my most valuable lessons on my own terms. With my savings from internships and graduation gifts from supportive instructors, I rented a small commercial kitchen space and launched Sweet Necessities Catering. The name was my private acknowledgement of how my skills had been born out of necessity rather than privilege. I reconnected with Sophia from the diner who had followed my culinary school journey with motherly pride. She became my first business partner, handling the books and client relations while I focused on the food. Her connections in the local restaurant scene helped secure our first clients. The business grew steadily over 5 years. What began as a one-woman operation expanded to include 2 part-time assistants and a delivery driver. My specialty became event dessert tables, elaborate displays of miniature pastries, hand-decorated cookies, and show-stopping centerpiece cakes, that told a story through sugar and flour. With the business's success came financial stability I had never known. At 26, I purchased a small 2-bedroom house with a kitchen I had designed myself, spacious countertops, professional-grade appliances, and a walk-in pantry always stocked with food. a deliberate contrast to the empty refrigerator of my childhood. My father and I settled into a pattern of obligatory dinner every few months, usually at a restaurant of his choosing. He would drink too much, complain about his job or current girlfriend, and occasionally make comments about my fancy cooking business that revealed both pride and resentment. I would listen, share minimal information about my own life, and drive home afterward, feeling drained, yet relieved to have maintained the fragile thread connecting us. He never apologized for the years of neglect. In his version of our shared history, he had been a struggling single father, doing his best, and I had been a remarkably self-sufficient child. The gaslighting was so complete that sometimes I questioned my own memories until I reminded myself of the hunger pangs, the empty cabinets, the nights spent calculating how to stretch $5 into enough food for 3 days. During one of our dinners, he mentioned casually, "I've been seeing someone pretty seriously. Her name's Vanessa. She's got 3 kids from her previous marriage." I nodded unsurprised. My father had a pattern of jumping into relationships quickly, though they rarely lasted. "That's nice. How old are her kids?" 7, 10, and 12, he replied, signaling the server for another beer. "Good kids. The oldest boy, Ryan, is into baseball. The middle one, Lizzie, she's quiet, reads a lot, and the little one, Amy, she's a firecracker." The detailed description of the children surprised me. My father had never shown much interest in children, including his own. Something about his tone suggested this relationship might be different from his previous ones. 3 weeks later, I learnt through a social media post that my father and Vanessa were engaged after just 4 months of dating. The photo showed them beaming at the camera, her left hand prominently displaying a modest diamond ring. Her 3 children stood awkwardly in the background, their expressions ranging from confusion to forced smiles. I sent a polite congratulatory text, received a thumbs-up emoji in response, and assumed that would be the extent of my involvement in their wedding plans. I was wrong. The first hint that Vanessa would be different from my father's previous girlfriends came when she sent me a friend request on social media, followed by a direct message. "So happy to finally connect with you. Your dad talks about you all the time. We'd love to have you over for dinner soon to celebrate our engagement. I've heard you're an amazing cook." The message caught me off guard. My father had never shown interest in hosting family dinners before. More surprising was the claim that he talked about me all the time. What version of me and our relationship was he sharing with his new fiancée? I accepted the dinner invitation out of curiosity more than familial obligation. The address they provided was my father's same small ranch house, unchanged from the outside, but noticeably different once I entered. The living room furniture had been rearranged, family photos of strangers now hung on the walls, and the air smelled of scented candles rather than stale beer. Vanessa greeted me with an enthusiastic hug as if we were already close. She was a petite woman in her mid-40s with highlighted blonde hair, carefully applied makeup, and an energy that filled the room. Her 3 children stood in a line behind her, clearly instructed to be on their best behavior. "Kids, this is Natalie, your new stepsister," Vanessa announced with a brightness that made me wince internally at the presumption. My father emerged from the kitchen holding a beer, looking simultaneously uncomfortable and pleased with himself. "Nat's here," he stated unnecessarily. "We're so excited to finally meet you," Vanessa continued. "Your father has told us all about your amazing catering business. He says you've been cooking since you were little." I glanced at my father, who avoided my eyes. "Yes, I started young out of necessity," I replied carefully. "Such a wonderful skill to develop early." Vanessa nodded approvingly. "None of my 3 can make anything more complicated than a sandwich. I've tried to teach them, but I'm hopeless in the kitchen myself." The dinner that followed was revealing. Vanessa had ordered takeout from an Italian restaurant, something my father had rarely done during my childhood unless trying to impress someone. She apologized repeatedly for not cooking, explaining that between work, the kids' activities, and wedding planning, there just wasn't time. "Natalie understands," my father interjected. "She's busy with her business too." As the evening progressed, I observed the dynamics between my father and his new family. He was more engaged than I had ever seen him, asking the children about school and activities, refilling Vanessa's wineglass attentively. It was as if he had been saving his parenting energy all these years, offering it now to children who weren't his own. The conversation eventually turned to the upcoming wedding planned for just 2 months away. "Nothing fancy," Vanessa explained. "Just family and close friends at the community centre. We're thinking of a potluck reception to keep costs down." She looked at me with a hopeful expression. "Your father mentioned you might be willing to help with dessert. Not the main wedding cake, My sister's friend is handling that, but maybe some cookies or brownies. We're trying to keep the budget reasonable. Gaze. Before I could respond, my father added, It wouldn't be a big deal for you. You do this stuff all the time for your business. The assumption that I would provide free professional services for their wedding stung, but I kept my expression neutral. I'll need to check my schedule. The wedding season is my busiest time. Oh, Vanessa's disappointment was evident. Well, even just a few dozen cookies would be helpful, whatever you can manage. I changed the subject by asking about their honeymoon plans, but the expectation had been established. In their minds, my professional skills were a family resource to be tapped whenever needed. After that initial dinner, Vanessa's requests came with increasing frequency. First, it was bringing dessert to family dinners, which became an expectation rather than an invitation. Then came requests for birthday cupcakes for her youngest daughter, cookies for her son's baseball team, and pastries for her office party. Each request was framed as just a small favor and accompanied by comments about family helping family. My father remained mostly silent during these exchanges, but would occasionally add, It's not like it's hard for you, Nat. You do this every day. The reality that these small favors required ingredients, time, professional equipment, and skills I had spent years developing seemed lost on both of them. More concerning was their apparent belief that because I had learned to cook young, it must have been easy or enjoyable, rather than a survival skill born of neglect. The situation reached a breaking point 3 months after the wedding. I was in the middle of preparing for a major corporate event when my phone buzzed with a text from Vanessa. Hi, Natalie. We're heading to the beach for the weekend with the kids. Could you prep some meals for us? Nothing fancy, just enough for fry dinner through sun lunch. Ryan doesn't eat seafood. Lizzie's going through a vegetarian phase, and Amy will only eat chicken if it's breaded. We can pick everything up Friday morning before we leave. Thanks so much. I stared at the message in disbelief. She wasn't asking for a quick dessert or even a single meal. She was requesting an entire weekend's worth of specialized meals for 5 people a service. My catering company charged hundreds of dollars for. I composed a polite but firm response. I'm sorry, but I'm preparing for a major client event this weekend and won't have time. There are several meal prep services in town that might be able to help with short notice. Her reply came quickly. Oh, I thought since you're already cooking anyway, it wouldn't be much extra work. Your dad said you can whip up meals in no time. We're really counting on you. The kids are so excited about having your food on our trip. The manipulation was both obvious and effective. I felt the familiar tug of guilt and obligation, the sense that refusing would somehow make me the villain. But years of therapy had helped me recognize these patterns, and I held firm. I'm sorry, but I can't this time. I need to prioritize my business commitments. For 3 days, there was silence from both Vanessa and my father. Then on Friday morning, the day they were supposed to leave for their trip, my doorbell rang at 7:30 a.m. I opened my front door still wearing pajamas and clutching my first coffee of the day to find Vanessa standing on my porch. Her smile was tight, her eyes determined, and in her hands were several empty food storage containers of various sizes. Good morning, she chirped with forced brightness. I hope it's not too early. I figured you'd be up cooking for that event you mentioned. I blinked, trying to process the audacity of her unannounced visit. Vanessa, what are you doing here? Well, I know you said you were busy, but I thought if I just dropped these off, you could fill them when you have a moment today. She held out the containers as if this was a perfectly reasonable request. We don't leave until 4, so there's plenty of time. The sleep fog lifted from my brain, replaced by a clarity that had been building for months. I stepped back and gestured to the living room. Come inside, we need to talk. Vanessa followed, still clutching her empty containers, her confidence faltering slightly at my tone. She sat on the edge of my sofa while I remained standing. Vanessa, I can't prepare meals for your trip, not because I don't have containers, but because I have boundaries. Her expression shifted between confusion and irritation. Boundaries. We're family now, Natalie. Families help each other. Do they? Because that hasn't been my experience? I replied calmly. My catering business isn't a hobby. It's my livelihood. What you're asking would cost a paying client over $300, not including the specialized meals for each family member's preferences. Vanessa's eyes widened. $300 for some simple meals? That's ridiculous. Your father said cooking comes so easily to you. He told me you've been making meals since you were 8 years old. It's second nature to you. The casual mention of my childhood cooking struck a nerve. Did my father explain why I was cooking at 8 years old? Well, he said you were always interested in cooking, very independent from a young age. She shifted uncomfortably. He's very proud of how self-sufficient you were. I took a deep breath. I cooked at 8 years old because if I didn't eat. My father didn't feed me, Vanessa. The refrigerator was empty most days. I taught myself to cook watching YouTube videos and spent my allowance on groceries because my father was too drunk or disinterested to remember he had a child to feed. Vanessa's expression froze somewhere between disbelief and embarrassment. I'm sure it wasn't. It was exactly that bad, I interrupted firmly. The cooking skills you and my father now want to exploit weren't developed from passion or natural talent. They were survival skills I was forced to learn because the adult in my life failed to meet his most basic responsibility. A heavy silence filled the room, broken by the sound of the front door opening. My father walked in without knocking, a habit that had always irritated me. What's taking so long? We need to pack the car. He stopped, sensing the tension. What's going on? Vanessa looked at him with new uncertainty. Natalie was just telling me about why she learned to cook as a child. My father's expression hardened. She's exaggerating. Sure, I wasn't the perfect parent after her mother left, but kids need to learn independence. The familiar minimization of his neglect ignited something in me. Years of therapy had helped me understand that my father would likely never acknowledge the full truth of my childhood, but hearing him dismiss it so casually in front of Vanessa broke the last thread of my restraint. Independence, I repeated. Is that what you call leaving an 8-year-old to feed herself? I wasn't learning life skills, Dad. I was surviving your neglect. Now wait a minute, he started, but I continued. Do you know what it's like to count coins to see if you have enough for bread and peanut butter to hide food in your bedroom because you're afraid of going hungry? To learn how to forge your father's signature on checks so the utilities don't get shut off? My father's face flushed with anger and embarrassment. That's ancient history. I did the best I could as a single father. No, you didn't, I replied, my voice steady despite the emotion behind it. You did the minimum you could get away with without someone calling child services. And now you and Vanessa think that because I managed to turn that survival skill into a career, I somehow owe it to you to feed your new family. Vanessa looked between us, clearly seeing my father in a new light. James, is this true? Did Natalie really have to take care of herself like this? My father avoided her gaze, deflecting with anger. Natalie always had a roof over her head and clothes to wear. Plenty of kids have it worse. That's your defense, that some children had it worse than your neglected daughter. I shook my head in disbelief. The bar was on the ground, and you still couldn't clear it. Turning to Vanessa, I continued more gently. I'm sorry if my father misrepresented our history to you, but I need to be very clear, I will not be providing free catering services to your family. My business is how I support myself. It's not a hobby, and my skills weren't developed for fun. Vanessa's cheeks flushed with shame. I had no idea. James never said. He made it sound like you enjoyed cooking from a young age. That's a convenient rewrite of history, I replied. But it's not the truth. My father, sensing he was losing control of the narrative, attempted a different approach. After everything I did for you, this is how you repay me, by embarrassing me in front of my wife and refusing to help with one simple request. The audacity of his question left me momentarily speechless. Then, with a calm that surprised even me, I responded, What exactly did you do for me? Dad, feed me? No. Teach me life skills? No. Support my education? No. Give me emotional stability? No. I raised myself while you checked out. I put myself through culinary school with scholarships and working double shifts. I built my business without a penny of help from you. I gestured toward the door. So no, I won't be preparing meals for your beach trip. I won't be providing free catering for your family events. I won't be exploited by the same person who couldn't be bothered to make sure I had dinner as a child. Vanessa stood, leaving the containers on my coffee table. We should go, James. We've clearly overstepped. My father remained rooted in place anger and something else. Perhaps shame battling across his features. So that's it. You're going to hold the past against me forever. What about forgiveness? Forgiveness requires acknowledgement and change, I replied. You've never even admitted what you did, let alone apologized for it. You've just rewritten history to make yourself feel better and to impress your new wife. I opened the front door, signaling the end of the conversation. I wish you all a nice beach trip. I'm sure there are plenty of restaurants where you're going. After a tense moment, my father stormed out without another word. Vanessa paused in the doorway, her expression troubled. I really didn't know. she said quietly. "I'm sorry for overstepping." I nodded in acknowledgement, but offered nothing more. As I closed the door behind them, I felt a mixture of emotions, the familiar ache of old wounds reopened, but also a surprising lightness. For the first time, I had spoken my truth without filtering it to protect my father's feelings or reputation. The empty containers sat on my coffee table, tangible symbols of expectations I was no longer willing to meet. I left them there as I returned to my kitchen to continue preparations for my actual client's event, every measured ingredient and precise technique, a reminder of how far I had come from the hungry child fending for herself. The fallout from the confrontation was both immediate and complex. My phone remained silent for the rest of the day as I channeled my emotional energy into my work, creating intricate pastries for the corporate event with even more precision and care than usual. The familiar rhythms of measuring, mixing, and baking provided a soothing counterpoint to the morning's chaos. By evening, my professional responsibilities completed, I allowed myself to process what had happened. Sitting on my back porch with a cup of tea, I replayed the conversation, examining my feelings without judgment. There was sadness for the relationship with my father that would likely never heal anger at his continued refusal to acknowledge the past, but also pride in my ability to finally stand firm in my truth. The first text came from my Aunt Susan, my father's sister, around 8 p.m. "Just heard from your dad about what happened. Don't you think you're being a little harsh? He's not perfect, but he kept a roof over your head. Family should help family." I hadn't expected my father to mobilize flying monkeys so quickly, but I wasn't surprised. This was his pattern: avoid responsibility by making others fight his battles. My response was brief but firm. I appreciate your concern, but this is between my father and me. I'm not comfortable discussing it further." More messages trickled in over the next few days from various relatives, most of whom had been absent during my childhood, but now felt qualified to weigh in on my selfishness and grudge holding. I responded to each with the same polite but firm boundary, refusing to justify my position to people who hadn't bothered to check if I was being fed as a child. Support came from unexpected sources. Sophia called after hearing about the confrontation through our small town's efficient grapevine. "I always wondered about your home situation," she admitted. "There were signs, but you were so private, so determined to handle everything yourself. I should have done more." "So? You did plenty," I assured her. "You taught me, mentored me, gave me a safe place to be. That mattered more than you know." My closest friend from culinary school, Marcus, offered a different perspective during our weekly video call. "You know what's crazy? If your dad had just apologized and acknowledged what happened, you probably would have made those meals for his trip." His observation struck me as profoundly true. My anger wasn't about the requests themselves, but the entitled expectation based on a falsified version of our shared past. If my father had ever once said, "I know I failed you and I'm sorry. I'm trying to do better with these kids," my response might have been entirely different. A week after the confrontation, I received an unexpected message on social media from Lizzie, Vanessa's 10-year-old daughter. "Hi Natalie, Mum doesn't know I'm messaging you. I'm sorry about what happened. Dad told us you're being selfish, but I heard Mum telling him he was wrong about how he treated you when you were little. I just wanted to say your cookies at the wedding were really good, and I'm sorry if we made you feel bad." The message was a poignant reminder that innocent children were caught in the middle of adult conflicts. These kids hadn't done anything wrong, and they were likely receiving a distorted version of events filtered through my father's defensive lens. After careful consideration, I replied, "Thank you for your message, Lizzie. You have nothing to apologize for. Adults sometimes disagree, but that has nothing to do with you or your siblings. I'm glad you enjoyed the cookies at the wedding." The exchange with Lizzie triggered a realization. While I had no obligation to provide free catering services to my father and Vanessa, I also didn't want to punish the children for their parents' entitlement. These kids were being raised in a household where cooking wasn't prioritized or taught a different kind of neglect than mine perhaps, but still a gap in their development. During my next therapy session, I explored this complex tangle of feelings. I'm angry at my father and frustrated with Vanessa's expectations. I explained to Dr. Winters, but I also feel a strange connection to these kids who are growing up without learning basic food skills. "It sounds like you're recognizing a cycle," she observed, "and perhaps seeing an opportunity to break it in a way that honors your boundaries while still being true to your values." Her words resonated deeply. My cooking skills had been born from neglect, but they had also become my salvation and eventually my livelihood. Perhaps there was a way to share that knowledge without being exploited. After much reflection, I drafted a message to Vanessa. I've been thinking about our conversation last week. While I stand by my boundaries regarding free catering services, I would be open to teaching monthly cooking lessons to the kids if that's something they'd be interested in. Basic cooking is an essential life skill they should have, regardless of what happens between the adults in their lives. Let me know if this is something you'd consider. Vanessa's response came within minutes. That's incredibly generous. The kids would love that. James is still upset, but I think this could be good for everyone. Thank you. My father's reaction was predictably negative. He sent a terse text. We don't need your charity cooking lessons. Kids are fine. Vanessa must have overruled him, however, because 2 weeks later she dropped the children off at my house for the first cooking lesson. My father remained in the car, refusing to come inside a childish protest that the kids clearly found embarrassing. Don't worry about Dad, Ryan, the 12-year-old, said as they entered my kitchen. He's been grumpy ever since Mom made him start cooking dinner twice a week. This unexpected information that my confrontation had prompted actual change in my father's behavior was both surprising and validating. Vanessa had apparently taken my revelation seriously enough to demand more equal participation in family responsibilities. The first cooking lesson was simple basic knife skills and a straightforward pasta dish that the children could replicate at home. Unlike my solitary, desperate learning experience, theirs was filled with laughter questions and the occasional food fight with flour. They left with sauce-splattered clothes, containers of pasta they had made themselves, and proud smiles. As Vanessa collected them, she lingered at the door. They haven't stopped talking about this all week. It means a lot to them. And to me. James will come around eventually. I nodded, not particularly concerned about whether my father came around or not. For the first time in my life, I wasn't making decisions based on his approval or participation. I was choosing my own path, setting my own boundaries, and finding unexpected healing in the process. 6 months after the confrontation in my living room, my relationship with my father's new family had evolved in ways I never anticipated. The monthly cooking lessons with Ryan, Lizzie, and Amy had become a cherished tradition for all of us. What began as basic pasta and safe knife skills had progressed to homemade pizzas, simple baking, and even a special holiday cookie decorating session. The children's progress filled me with a complicated pride. Ryan had developed a particular talent for flavor combinations, experimenting with herbs and spices with surprising sophistication. Lizzie methodically followed recipes with scientific precision, while 7-year-old Amy approached cooking with artistic abandon, more concerned with the visual presentation than exact measurements. You don't cook like Mum or Dad, Amy observed one afternoon as we prepared a simple stir-fry. You don't get all stressed and yell when things go wrong. Cooking should be enjoyable, I explained, helping her salvage slightly overcooked vegetables by adding a complementary sauce. Mistakes are just opportunities to learn something new. This philosophy, so different from my own fraught culinary education, became the foundation of our lessons. Where I had learnt to cook from desperation and necessity, these children were discovering the joy and creativity of preparing food in a supportive environment. My father remained distant, dropping the children off for lessons but rarely acknowledging me directly. Occasionally, I would catch him watching through the window as the kids proudly carried their creations to the car, his expression unreadable. Vanessa reported that he had become more involved in household responsibilities, including regular cooking duties, though she suspected it was more from a desire to maintain his image in her eyes than genuine recognition of past failures. The most unexpected development came 4 months after our first cooking lesson. I was closing my shop after a busy Saturday when my father appeared alone, looking uncomfortable and out of place among the pristine display cases and professional equipment. Need to talk to you, he said gruffly, hands shoved in his pockets. Got a minute? I nodded, curious, despite myself, and led him to a small table in the corner. For several minutes, he simply sat in silence, seemingly gathering his thoughts, or perhaps his courage. The kids won't shut up about your cooking lessons, he finally said. Every damn dinner now they're criticizing my technique or suggesting improvements they learned from you. I suppressed a smile. They're enthusiastic learners. Yeah, well, he cleared his throat. Vanessa says I should take some lessons too. The request, buried in complaint, though it was, caught me completely off guard. You want cooking lessons from me? He stared at the table, avoiding my eyes. Vanessa says I need to acknowledge what happened when you were a kid. She says I can't keep pretending it was normal. It wasn't normal, I confirmed quietly. It was neglect. He flinched at the word but didn't deny it. I wasn't in a good place after your mum left, started drinking too much, got lost in my own problems. I was 7 years old, Dad. I needed a parent, not a roommate. He nodded slowly, still not meeting my eyes. I know that now. Seeing Vanessa with her kids, seeing how much work it is to actually parent properly, I realise I checked out when you needed me most. It wasn't quite an apology, but it was the closest he had ever come to acknowledging the reality of my childhood. I sat with the moment, allowing myself to feel the complex emotions. It triggered the lingering hurt of the neglected child I had been, but also a cautious appreciation for the small step toward truth. So these cooking lessons, I finally said, what exactly are you looking for? He shrugged, attempting casual indifference, though his discomfort was evident. Just the basics, I guess. Enough so the kids stop rolling their eyes when I make dinner. I considered his request, weighing my own boundaries against the potential for healing. I don't think I'm the right teacher for you, Dad. There's too much history there. His face fell slightly, though he tried to hide his disappointment. Yeah, I get it. Was a stupid idea anyway. But, I continued, I could recommend a basic cooking course at the community centre. Or if you prefer something more private, my assistant Kevin does one-on-one coaching. You'd do that after everything. I'm not doing it for the past, I clarified. I'm doing it because learning to cook properly will benefit your family, now including those 3 kids I've come to care about. He nodded, accepting this framing that allowed him to save face. That community centre thing might work. I could check it out. As he stood to leave, he hesitated, then spoke with unusual sincerity. You turned out good, Nat. Better than you had any right to given everything. I don't know how you did it. I didn't have a choice, I replied honestly, but I'm glad you're choosing to do better now. After he left, I sat alone in my shop processing the interaction. It wasn't the dramatic reconciliation or profound apology that movies might portray. There was no tearful embrace or explicit acknowledgement of all the ways he had failed me, but it was a crack in the wall of denial he had maintained for decades. A small admission that what had happened wasn't right, and that different choices were possible going forward. 2 weeks later, Vanessa sent me a photo of my father awkwardly, but proudly holding a homemade lasagna he had prepared in his community centre cooking class. The accompanying message read, First non-burned dinner in 30 years, small steps. Small steps indeed. As I continued teaching Ryan, Lizzie and Amy, I realised that breaking cycles of neglect doesn't always happen through grand gestures or perfect resolutions. Sometimes it happens through pasta sauce and cookie dough, through simple acknowledgements of past failures, through the quiet decision to do better with the next generation. The hungry, forgotten child I had been would always be part of my story. The skills born from necessity would always carry the faint echo of trauma beneath their professional polish. But as I watched my step-siblings learn to feed themselves with joy rather than desperation, I found a healing I hadn't known I needed, not in having my past acknowledged, though that mattered, but in ensuring that history would not repeat itself. The final breakthrough came unexpectedly at Thanksgiving. Vanessa had organised an ambitious family dinner with each person contributing a dish. My father, to everyone's surprise, volunteered to make the mashed potatoes and gravy, applying his newly acquired skills with nervous determination. As we gathered around the table, an imperfect blended family still finding its way, Vanessa asked each person to share something they were grateful for. When my turn came, I found myself saying, I'm grateful that skills born from hardship can transform into sources of joy and connection. My father met my eyes across the table for the first time in months, a look of genuine understanding passing between us. He didn't speak, but his slight nod acknowledged the journey, his failures my resilience, and the unexpected path that had brought us to this moment of tentative peace. Later, as I helped wash dishes, Ryan sidled up beside me. Dad told us yesterday that when he was our age, his mum did all the cooking. He never learned how. Then when you were little, he didn't know how to make proper meals, so you taught yourself. That's partly true, I said carefully. He said he should have done better by you. Ryan continued, drying a plate with unexpected thoroughness. And that's why he's trying harder with us. He said sometimes you have to admit when you've messed up if you want to do better. The simple wisdom coming from my father through this 12-year-old boy brought unexpected tears to my eyes. It wasn't the direct apology I deserved, but it was an acknowledgement shared with the children in his care that he had failed and was trying to change. In that moment, I realized that sometimes healing doesn't look like we expect. Sometimes it comes sideways through teaching others what we had to teach ourselves, through watching cycles of neglect, end with new generations through small admissions of failure, shared with children who might grow up to make different choices. Have you ever had to transform pain into strength or found healing in unexpected places? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if you're navigating complicated family dynamics of your own, remember that setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's essential for breaking harmful cycles. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe for more conversations about family resilience and the complicated path to healing. Share with someone who might need to hear that their past hardships don't define their future possibilities. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, the skills we develop to survive can eventually become the gifts we choose to share, but always on our own terms.